Hey, what's going on? Ryan here with Intersection Records. And unfortunately, talking about another famous rock star's passing away. Robbie Robertson has passed away at the age of 80 from a long illness. Robbie Robertson's famous for being the lead guitar player and main songwriter for the band. Songs like The Wait, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, Up on Cripple Creek, solo material like Broken Arrow, just legendary songs, Somewhere Down the Crazy River, really just standards in rock. Jamie Royal Robertson was born on July 5th, 1943 in Toronto, Canada, to Father James Robertson and Mother Rosemary Dolly Chrysler. They had met at work in the factory in 1942. She was part Cuyahoga and Mohawk Indian, and she was raised on the Six Nations Reserve in Canada. Robbie would frequent that reserve as a child and learn music there, learn some guitar playing. He was a huge music fan, listening to radio stations out of Buffalo, New York, and catching some blues shows from Nashville on the radio. Really started traveling, summer jobs, traveling carnival circuit. When his parents separated in his early teens, he found out that his biological father was not James Robertson, but a man that his mother had met, who was a professional gambler and who ended up being killed on the highway in a hit-and-run accident. In 1956, Robbie joins his first band, the Little Caesars and the Consuls, followed by a band called Suedes. It's here with the Suedes that Robbie meets Ronnie Hawkins. Ronnie Hawkins was a leader of a band called the Hawks. The Hawks featured Levon Helm on drums, and they toured in 62 and 63 together. The band, the Hawks, ultimately gets rounded out but with Richard Manuel, Rick Danko, and Garth Hudson. In 1964, Ronnie leaves the band, and for a period of time, the band is known as Levon and the Hawks. In 1965, the Hawks are brought to Bob Dylan's attention, and Robbie and Levon do some dates in New York and in Flushing Meadows in the Hollywood Bowl. The rest of the Hawks round out a European tour in 66, the famous Electric Tour, where at the Royal Albert Hall, somebody screams out Judas to Dylan, and I think Dylan says, "I don't know who you are," or something, or I make some Bible reference. This is documented in the fantastic show, the Bootleg Series Volume 4, Dylan at the Royal Albert Hall. I recommend that highly as a great documentation of that tour and really legendary shows. In February of 67, in July, late July of 66, Dylan is involved in a motorcycle accident, at which point he retreats to upstate New York to a little hamlet called Woodstock. In February of 67, Dylan invites the Hawks, who are still on touring retainer and living in the Chelsea Hotel, up to Woodstock, where they take residence up at a house known as Big Pink. And from the spring of 67 through the fall of 67, every day Dylan comes over and they record in the basement. And ultimately in 68, these tapes are being bootlegged widely, and they're leaked out. Quinn the Eskimo, some great songs, I Shall Be Released, come from these sessions. And really the basement takes for years are floated as bootlegs and finally released in, I think, 1975 as an official double album, chock full of songs of Dylan with the help of what's now known as the band. And in 1968, the band released their first album as the band called Music from Big Pink, and followed that up with 1967's seminal album The Band. The band ends up performing that August at Woodstock, the original Woodstock, and later that summer with Bob Dylan at the Isle of Wight Festival. They would get back together with Dylan in '74 for a tour and the great Dylan studio album Planet Waves. By 1976, Robbie's ready to call it quits with the band, and they do their great show at Winterland Ballroom, I think on the 25th of November, Thanksgiving, The Last Waltz, featuring Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Dylan, you name it, Van Morrison, all the special guests. Robbie's a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame from 1994, the National Academy of Songwriters induction in 1997. He's inducted in the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2011, as well as in 2011 he was made an Officer of the Order of Canada by Governor Gerald David Johnston. And again, songs like The Wait, Night of Day, Dorville, Dixie Down, Up on Cripple Creek, just classic, legendary songs. He had a long, distinguished career with collaborations with Martin Scorsese on movies like The Last Waltz, Raging Bull, The Kings of Comedy, Casino, The Departed, Wolf of Wall Street, and The Irishman. He had 3 children, and again, he's passed away today at the age of 80. Rest in peace, Robbie. I was set to see you at the Crossroads Guitar Festival in September, which would have been next month, and that is not going to happen. I never did see Robbie. Roy Buchanan was an influence. Roy Buchanan, famous Telecaster player, was in the Hawks briefly, and for several months they played together, and got some of his style off of Buchanan, who himself died way too young. But peace out, rest in peace. See ya.